A Mexican mayor arrested for involvement in a cartel death camp. A Canadian Hells Angel shot dead in front of a Chinese restaurant. All of that and much more on this week's edition of Organized Crime News Weekly. Welcome back to Organized Crime News Weekly. This is the weekly show where we discuss the goings-on in the global criminal underworld. My name is Kiva Dottie. Before I start, I just want to remind everyone to please like, share, and subscribe so we can help grow this channel. May 2nd saw the seizure of 3 million fentanyl pills, 11.5 kilos of fentanyl powder, 75 pounds of meth, 4.5 kilos of heroin, 7.5 kilos of cocaine, along with 49 weapons, 7 vehicles, and $5 million in cash in an operation conducted by the DEA against a drug trafficking network that is said to be linked to the Sinaloa Cartel. 16 individuals were also arrested as part of these raids carried out by the DEA. The U.S. Attorney General claims this to be, quote, the largest seizure of fentanyl in history, which I don't place much stock in. To me, this comes as a politician trying to pat themselves on the back for their accomplishments. Approximately 55,000 hours were spent tracking the drugs from Mexico by the DEA, who managed to infiltrate different levels of the Sinaloa cartel. The drugs were part of a distribution network that operated in several American states, such as New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Oregon, and Utah. The leader of this drug trafficking network is a Mexican citizen based in Salem, Oregon, by the name of Heriberto Salazar Amaya. In the past, he has already been deported from the U.S. twice, and at the time of his arrest was carrying millions of dollars in cash. DEA hasn't stated exactly how the arrested man, Salazar Amaya, is connected to the Sinaloa cartel. The Sinaloa cartel is arguably the most powerful Mexican cartel, with tentacles all over the world, but currently the two most powerful factions of the Sinaloa cartel are embroiled in the civil war. On one side is Los Chapitos, the sons of one of the former leaders of the Sinaloa cartel, the infamous Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. The other side led by Ismael Zambada Siqueiros, also the son of one of the former leaders of the Sinaloa cartel, Ismael El Mayo Zambada, who was arrested last July and is currently facing charges in the United States. His arrest is what led to this civil war between these two factions, as it is thought that the Chapitos took El Mayo hostage in order to deliver him to the Americans as part of a negotiation strategy to get linear sentences for two of the Chapitos that are already in U.S. custody. And I should also point out that this fentanyl seizure comes as the Sinaloa cartel is reportedly producing less fentanyl. A couple years ago, a decree came down by the Chapitos for fentanyl producers to stop producing the drug due to increased pressure from U.S. law enforcement. But despite that ruling by the Chapitos, there are still select individuals producing fentanyl under their umbrella. But this is just another case of a large seizure of fentanyl. The DEA and the U.S. Attorney General seem to be making a big deal out of it, claiming that they're saving lives by taking these drugs off the streets. But fentanyl will always continue to flow as long as there is a demand for it. But despite this, the U.S. continues to wage its failed war on drugs, despite the fact that it has not put a dent in the U.S. drug market. Our next story, on May 2nd, Florin Kopia, Albania's most wanted man, was extradited back to Tirana, Albania, from Dubai, where he had been living for the last 7 years. Kopia was arrested in Dubai back in May of 2021, but it took him almost 4 years to be returned back to Albania. He is wanted for several crimes, including for his role in the 2012 murders of father and son Nazir and Genshin Bakiri, for which he has already been convicted of and sentenced to life imprisonment. He continues to deny his role in the double murder and claims that Ervis Bardhi, the witness against him in that case, was manipulated by the prosecution. Genshin was murdered because he allegedly murdered Sokol Kapia, a local businessman and relative of Florin, back in 2005. Genshin was blamed for this murder, and his father Nazir was collateral damage. They were both murdered, despite the fact that Genshin was under house arrest at the time. As well as these two murders, Kopia is also accused of the attempted murder of a man named Sokol Sangsatari. But since his extradition last week, Kopia has been acquitted of charges that he murdered police officer Fadil Mima back in 2006. But this decision was appealed by the prosecution, and a retrial has been granted. So who is Florin Kopia, and why am I talking about him? He is a member of the infamous Kopia clan. They're one of the top Albanian criminal organizations that imports cocaine into Europe from South America. In recent years, the Albanians have managed to become very dominant in the international cocaine trade. Albanian clans have managed to form strong ties with Italian criminal organizations. Many of them now have bases in South American countries such as Ecuador, and they coordinate shipments to Europe directly with the groups that produce the cocaine in countries such as Colombia. But the Kopia clan was just one of these many groups, and they are said to be directly responsible for coordinating massive shipments of cocaine from South America into Europe. Kopia clan is based out of the Albanian city of Elbasan, where the city government is strongly accused of having strong links to organized crime and shielding them from prosecution. Florenc Kopia, the man who was extradited this past week, his uncle is Ardian Kopia, who is one of the leaders of the Kopia clan, and he was also convicted of the double murder that Florenc was convicted of, and he was also sentenced to life imprisonment. The Kopia clan was initially started by Frank Kopia and his brother Hadjar around 2006 when they were living in Italy. Frank was based out of Dubai until just a couple years ago when he was extradited to Belgium, where he had been based prior. While leading the Kopia clan in Belgium, they waged war against the Ali Bey clan, also based out of Elbasan, which was led by Ardit Spahiu. This feud started after a shipment of cocaine went missing in Great Britain, which is another strong base. In recent years, they've managed to almost take over the cocaine trade in the UK. But the Kopias emerged victorious after the murder of Spahiu in Brussels in 2020. In addition to Belgium, the Kopias also have a strong base in the ports of Amsterdam and Rotterdam, which are arguably the top two ports for cocaine entering Europe. And as I said, the Kopias have a strong presence in the UK, where they coordinate shipments all throughout Europe by way of trucks. The trucks pick up the cocaine in the UK, and they deliver them all throughout Europe, even as far as driving them all the way back to Albania. But despite some of the top leaders of the Kopia clan, including Florenc, being arrested and sent to prison, they are just one of the many Albanian criminal organizations that have spread their tentacles across the globe. The Albanians seem to be growing extremely dominant in the cocaine trade, and I don't think this is a trend that is going to go away anytime soon. We shall see how the Albanians continue to make their presence known in the international cocaine trade. For our next story, on May 1st, a Turkish national by the name of Semil Onal was shot dead on the terrace of a hotel in Rijswijk in the Netherlands. This came a couple days after Onal spoke on the Follow the Money investigative outlet and said that he expected an attack on his life. His lawyer told Follow the Money that he had informed the Dutch authorities several times that Onal's life was in danger. And why am I talking about Onal? Prior to his murder, he had been named by Turkish authorities as the mastermind of the 2022 murder of Halil Falyali, a Turkish Cypriot businessman who allegedly ran an illegal gambling operation that is said to have generated $80 million a month. Onal denied that he played a role in Falyali's murder. Falyali publicly was a successful hotel proprietor and flaunted his wealth on social media. He is said to have started in illegal gambling in Turkey back in 2004, and in 2013 he registered his company called Larsen Technologies Limited. The company operated betting shops and a website under the name of betsip.com. Falyali mainly operated in northern Cyprus, which is the northern part of the island of Cyprus. Since 1974, it has been recognized by Turkey as independent from the rest of Cyprus, but no other country recognizes Northern Cyprus. And Northern Cyprus has become a hub of illegal gambling and money laundering, as the case of Falyali greatly demonstrates. Falyali was gunned down with automatic weapons back in February 2022 when he was ambushed by gunmen while being driven home by his driver, who was also killed in the attack. In December 2022, 240 associates of Falyali were arrested on illegal gambling and money laundering charges, including his own widow. Onal, the man who was just murdered last week, also claimed that Falyali made videos to blackmail politicians. Onal worked as the head of finance for Falyali, and he told journalists prior to his death that he made payments of about $15 million a month on behalf of Falyali to politicians in Turkey and northern Cyprus. And Turkish politicians have a long history of allegedly colluding with organized crime figures. This goes back to when prominent members of organized crime in Turkey were members of ultra-nationalist Turkish groups such as the Grey Wolves, who strongly support the Turkish government that is currently led by Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And also in recent years, Turkey has become a refuge for criminals from all over the world, as they see Turkey as a place that politicians and police can easily be bought off. However, in the last couple of years, it seems that Turkey has been trying to clean their image with massive raids carried out against members of criminal organizations. Some cynical observers would probably say that this is an attempt to camouflage what is actually going on, but who knows? But going back to Onal, the funds he moved for Falyali were allegedly moved offshore through corporate entities registered in Curacao, the island in the Caribbean that is under the territory of the Netherlands, which has also become a strong base for organized crime and money laundering. Onal stopped working for Falyali in December 2021. In December of 2023, Onal was arrested in the Netherlands on an international warrant from Turkey, and prior to his death, he had been fighting extradition, claiming that Turkish officials were looking to silence him for the allegations he had made against politicians. While in prison, Onal gave more than 20 hours of interviews to journalists, where he detailed the illegal gambling operations and its inner workings. The report was published in February, and Onal was released from prison shortly thereafter. Since these allegations came to light, Turkish opposition politicians have been trying to utilize these accusations to attack the ruling party. President Erdogan has claimed these allegations are part of a smear campaign, but obviously he would say something like that. But as of now, no one has been arrested for the murder of Onal in the Netherlands. But it seems pretty clear that some powerful people in Turkey wanted to silence him. Who exactly that is remains unknown. But I thought this story greatly illustrates the corrupt relationship that occurs very often between politics and organized crime in Turkey. But I'm doubtful that any justice will ever be brought to Onal's murder, considering all the powerful players that are involved. For our next story, we're going to Canada, where Canadian Hells Angel leader Craig McElquim, also known as Truck, was shot dead while leaving a Chinese restaurant in Burlington, Ontario on the night of April 29th in what is considered a targeted shooting. The photograph has been released by investigators showing a gray Honda Civic, which is believed to have been the vehicle used in the shooting. And now background on the man known as Truck. Prior to his death, he was president of the Niagara chapter of the Hells Angels. He started out as the bodyguard of Walter Nurgis Stadnik, who is perhaps the most legendary Hells Angel in Canada, and is said to have greatly contributed to the expansion of the Hells Angels throughout all of Canada in the past 40 years. At one point, he was the Canadian national president of the Hells Angels. Some say he still holds on to that position despite being elderly. But going back to Truck, the man that was murdered, back in 2019, he was arrested as part of Operation Hobart, which was a 2-year probe into an illegal gambling ring that was allegedly being run by the Hells Angels and a faction of the Ndrangheta, the Calabrian-based organization that I've talked about many times on this show already, as well as having strong bases all throughout the world. They've had a very strong base in Ontario, Canada, for almost a century now, particularly in the city of Hamilton, and the Hells Angels often work hand in hand with Italian organized crime in Canada. A Truck was charged with bookmaking, firearms violations, and committing crimes for the benefit of a criminal organization. He allegedly ran this gambling ring along with Robert Barletta, the founder of the London, Ontario chapter of the Hells Angels. Barletta currently is considered to be one of the most influential Hells Angels in Canada. As of recently, he's been based out of Montreal and is said to be the trusted man of Martin Robert, who in addition to being the most powerful Hells Angel in Quebec, is said to be one of the most powerful Hells Angels throughout the whole world, as Canada has become the center of power for the Hells Angels throughout the whole world. The gambling ring run by Truck and Barletta is said to have controlled at least 14 sports betting websites, including 5 illegal offshore sites based in the Caribbean, as well as an illegal gambling house in Mississauga, Ontario. The ring was said to have taken in more than $160 million in revenue between 2014 and 2019. As part of Operation Hobart, more than 30 people were arrested. The police seized from Truck more than $50,000 in cash, a gun, a gold bar, and coins, along with a Brazilian visa with a fake name. However, in 2022, all charges were dropped against Truck and his co-accused after it was estimated the case would take nearly 42 months to complete, exceeding the 30-month limit that is required by Canadian criminal law, and this delay came about in part due to COVID-19. But as of now, the motive behind the murder of Truck remains unknown. Some are pointing fingers at the Ndrangheta for being allegedly responsible for his murder, maybe over some sort of business dispute, potentially involving the illegal gambling ring that got busted a few years ago. It could potentially be related to the war going on in neighboring Quebec between the Hells Angels and street gangs over drug turf, but as of yet, no evidence points in that direction. Ontario has managed to stay away from much of the violence that is currently occurring in Quebec, but who knows exactly what led up to Truck's murder. He was a powerful Hells Angel, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's some retaliation for his murder. The Hells Angels in recent years have also become the dominant force in Canadian organized crime, usurping powerful groups like the Sicilian Rizzutos. We shall see if there are any fallouts and arrests due to Truck's murder. Our next story concerns Jose Ascension Murgua Santiago, the mayor of Teyucatlan in the state of Jalisco, Mexico, who this past Saturday was arrested by federal authorities on charges of organized crime against the community and forced disappearance. The authorities claim that he was aware of the forced recruitment, training, executions, and cannibalism that were going on at the Izaguirre Ranch under the auspices of the Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación, in English, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG, and that he tried to cover it up. I talked about the Izaguirre Ranch when it was raided back in March. It's become a huge story around the world, as it encapsulates the true barbarity of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Mayor Murgua Santiago is accused of having received 70,000 pesos, or $3,585 per month, from the CJNG. In addition to allowing the ranch to operate, he is said to have visited the ranch on a number of occasions and met regularly with Jose Gregorio Lastra, also known as El Comandante, and Gonzalo Mendoza Gaitan, also known as El Sapo, both of whom are regional leaders of the CJNG and are believed to have overseen the operations at the Izaguirre Ranch. Murgua Santiago is also alleged to have allowed members of the CJNG to drive around the city in vehicles that had been reported stolen. He is also said to have arranged for police surveillance to prevent recruits at the ranch from escaping, as a lot of these recruits are lured to the camp on false promises that they are going to be working some other legal profession. But I think most shocking of all is that Murgua Santiago is alleged to have played an active role in the disposal of human remains, such as dumping organs into a clandestine grave near the property. But as I have mentioned before, the Izaguirre Ranch was initially raided in September 2024 by the Mexican National Guard, despite Jalisco authorities having been aware of what was going on at the ranch since 2021. This led to a few arrests and a body being discovered, but the authorities appear to have done a very lackluster job of investigating the property. And then this past March, a group of mothers searching for their lost children entered the property, where they found bone remains, hundreds of pairs of shoes, personal items, and the identifications of people who had forcibly been recruited. As well as the arrest of Murgua Santiago this past Saturday, 12 police officers, including a police chief, have been arrested in connection with the activities going on at the Izaguirre Ranch. After his arrest, Murgua Santiago was transferred to a prison in Mexico City, where he is currently sitting. I wish I could say I was more shocked by this story, but as anyone who's probably listening is aware of, Mexican politics and law enforcement is unbelievably corrupt in cities all across the country. That is how the cartels have managed to grow so significantly without any real challenge by the Mexican state. And because of this, they have been allowed to basically carve out territories all across Mexico where they control all aspects of everyday normal life in communities all across Mexico. CJNG has managed to do this throughout the whole state of Jalisco and even into neighboring states like Michoacan and Guanajuato as they wage brutal campaigns against cartels in those regions. But this story seems like the textbook definition of corrupt Mexican politicians working with drug cartels, to the point where the accused Murgua Santiago was even handling dead bodies and disposing of the remains. He is definitely not the first Mexican politician to be accused of extreme corruption like this, and he most assuredly will not be the last. But this is a perfect illustration of how great cartel wealth is and how it has managed to bend the Mexican state to its will. All right, that's going to do it for this week's edition of Organized Crime News Weekly. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back next week to report on more stories concerning the global criminal underworld. Thank you so much for tuning in.